Good morning and welcome in. My name is Pastor Ryan. I am Pastor Kerry's oldest son, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being part of this family. God is using you in huge ways at Woodlands Church, whether you're here locally in the Houston area or joining us from around the world. We are one church in many locations, and we are growing as a church family. And I just want to encourage you and say great job by doing these daily devotionals. You understand that church is not something that happens just on Sunday. It's for every other day of the week, and it's all about centering your life on Christ. So you are doing that by staying plugged in through a daily quiet time, through these devotionals, and by really just sharing the love of Christ with your friends. So I encourage you to continue to share these videos. Well, last weekend, Pastor Kerry preached about a really powerful topic. He talked about wipeout, what it means for God to wipe out all of our sins and give us a fresh, clean slate. It's a really powerful message. I encourage you to watch the whole thing if you missed it. But I also want to touch on one of the topics he talked about, which is grace. A lot of times from a human perspective, we don't understand what grace is or how it really works. And he talked about the story of Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth is a guy who is crippled, but he's a descendant of Saul. Saul is one of the enemies of David. David and Saul used to be friends, but then over time, Saul became jealous of David and ended up trying to kill him. And so Saul has since passed away when this story is being told, but David says, find me a descendant of Saul because I want to bless his family. And so his servants go and find the remaining descendant of Saul and say, here he is. He's a crippled guy named Mephibosheth. He's just over here. They bring him in to King David's table, his royal table, his really banquet, and they're about to have a feast, and David says, come on in, Mephibosheth, you are part of my family now. And that's really a reflection of the way that Christ sees us, is that we don't deserve his grace, we are really crippled in our ability to do anything, and we don't have the ability to really serve him fully the way we should. We have so many limitations, but God doesn't see any of that. All he sees is who we are, and we are a descendant of the King. We are a descendant of Christ, a descendant of God. And so I want to encourage you that live in that faith, knowing that you are a descendant of Christ. But here's what Mephibosheth says, because he doesn't understand grace. He doesn't get it. He says, it says this in 2 Samuel 9, verse 8. Mephibosheth bowed down and said to David, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? It's a really powerful phrase. Now take a look at this clip from Pastor Kerry.
And we have so much trouble receiving grace. Here he is, offered grace. Hey, I'm going to bless you. Give you something you didn't deserve. I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to restore all that you've lost. And he's saying, I'm a dead dog. I'm awful. I'm no good, and I'm bad. And he was having so much trouble receiving God's grace, and that's just like us. Do you have trouble receiving God's grace? There are many times when I just struggle with receiving God's grace. It's so hard to comprehend God's unconditional love and grace because it's so foreign to us in our flesh. Grace, unconditional love, even though we don't do anything to earn it or deserve it. How do you know if you're struggling receiving God's grace? You try to earn it. And when you really mess up, you think you don't deserve it. You think you didn't earn it. You don't deserve it. So you kind of move away from God. You just don't deserve it. You feel ashamed. But grace, by its very definition, is something that is undeserved. You can't deserve it. You can't earn it. Who do we think we are that we can earn God's grace or feel a little better about getting God's grace? No, God gives his grace freely and unconditionally. All we got to do is receive it. Step into it and receive it. How do you know if you're struggling to receive God's grace? Well, first, you think you have to earn it, and when you sin, when you blow it, you think you don't deserve it. Of course you don't deserve it. We never could deserve it. We just have to accept it. But then when you have trouble receiving God's grace, when you're doing really good and you're really living for God, and you're really obeying God, then you think everything should be perfect in your life, that God should bless you with everything perfect, and there should never be any problems. And then when a problem comes your way, you're like, what? I don't deserve this. You look over at someone who's just living in sin. He's like, it doesn't love God. Maybe someone doesn't even believe in God and they're getting blessed. And then you're like, that's not fair. I don't deserve this, God. And we forget that we don't want what we deserve. We deserve punishment for our sin. We don't want what we deserve. We want mercy and we want grace. And so if you're having trouble receiving grace, just know that most of us Christ followers do. And we just got to come to the place where we just receive his grace. It's not about earning it. We never could. We got to live in it and receive it, and just know that Satan wants to use that shame to keep you from living and breathing in God's atmosphere of grace.
Wow, isn't that a powerful concept that you can receive grace? I know some of you are so good at giving grace to people around you, but you have a really hard time receiving grace. Receive it from others, receiving it for yourself, and receiving it from Christ. So I just want to encourage you today, you have to receive God's grace. We don't know how grace works. Really, it's a supernatural concept that we're trying to understand from our limited human perspective. But I want to encourage you that your view of grace really determines so much about your life. You have to accept God's grace and first go, God, I don't deserve your grace at all. I don't deserve it. I encourage you to just pray to him. God, with open hands, I realize that I do not deserve your grace at all. I am broken. I am sinful. I am a failure in so many ways, but for some reason, you don't see that. You only see who I am, and it's yours. And so God, I ask with open hands, I receive it. What area of your life do you need God's grace in the most today? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know what areas of your life you're really looking for grace in. And also let us know how we can be praying for you, how our church family can be praying for you in the comments, how our pastors can be praying for you. I know Pastor Kerry looks through the comments very often. He'll pray over the comments. He cares about what's going on in your life. So I just want to say, continue to stay plugged in, continue to live out of God's grace today. Ask him for the grace you need today, and continue to strive after him as you grow in faith. Thanks so much and have an awesome day. We're praying for you.